and diversity. Understand, post-COVID, how things work, because clearly COVID has changed a lot of things for everyone. And everyone here is into some sort of employment or an employer. So either part of the equation you have, whether you're an employer or an employee, equality and diversity is something that relates to you one way or the other. So it's important that we understand, what it is right now after COVID, because there seems to be like a traditional equality and diversity idea. And from COVID, because now people are working from home mostly, certain things have changed. And those who are not even working from home that have returned to work, the condition at work also means that certain things need to be put in place. So for that, if you don't have, if you go back to work, and this is just a general explanation I want to give first to put us into what equality and diversity stands for post-COVID. Now, take for instance, if you go back to work and you maybe do front of house service, your employer knows to put a screen in front of your workplace to protect you from when people come into your space. So if that is not put in place, then why are they not putting it in place? Could it be because they can't care less because of you, who you are, what you are? These little things that needs to change because of COVID are the things that would inform the topic of equality and diversity. Okay, so without further ado, let's go into the topic for today. So the aim of this section is to look at what equality and diversity stands for. The Equality Act 2010 that I think would the government are looking into to then reform it. Importance of equality and diversity in workplace, discrimination and harassment. Post-COVID-19 work adjustment. So by the end of this section, participants will be able to understand the subject of equality and diversity in the workplace, okay? Now, if you have any question, please put it on the chat thing. And also, whilst we're discussing this, I would like to say as well, if you feel like you've been in this position of where you think there's not been fairness with your employer, or someone who has been unfairly treated, if you would like to share with us as well, that would really help everyone listening in today, because those practical experiences really make us understand better topics like this. Okay, so now let's go straight into it. So what is equality? Equality is ensuring everyone has equal rights and opportunity. Okay, equal rights and opportunities in your working company or organization, or wherever you find yourself carrying out some sort of work thing. And then diversity is identifying and value difference in everyone. Okay. Now, another word for equality and diversity is equal opportunity. Okay, so basically, everyone needs to be given equal opportunities in every workforce. And even though this word equality and diversity are, terms that we use together most times, but they're not the same. They're related, but not the same word. Okay. So the government created a legal framework which came into force through the 2021 Equality Act to protect people irrespective of their age, their sex, their race, their disability, their religion or belief, sexual orientation, gender reassessment, pregnancy, maternity, marriage, or civil partnership. It doesn't matter. Whichever category you fall into, you would and should be treated fairly in your work environment or workplace. So what are the importance of equality and diversity in the work environment or workplace? It is there to promote and support diversity it is there to promote and support. Now, promote, we all know it's to enhance, and then give the support that is required. One sec, I think I'm gonna have to take this off. Okay. So it is there to promote and support diversity in the workplace, which then create room for good people management. Okay, so when you have equality and diversity in the workplace, what tends to happen is you have a good people management in the organization, which in turn benefits the general organization. It is about valuing everyone in the organization as an individual. However, to reap the benefit of diversity in the workforce, it is vital to have an inclusive environment where everyone is appreciated and feel able to participate and achieve their potential. While the UK legislation covering age disability raise, among others, set a minimum standard for effective and inclusive environment to prosper, the strategy goes beyond just legal compliance. It seeks to add value to an organization by contributing to employee well-being and engagement, okay, according to the CPID website, okay? So all of these, there are levels to it, okay? So even though that the UK have put this legal framework in place in 2010 to sort of make a law to guide employers, it is essential that employers don't stick to just that. They have to go beyond the legal compliance and make sure that they put things in place to add value to their staffs. Okay, so the Discrimination Act Discrimination Act, according to the Equality Act 2010, the Section 39, Section 40 and 41 stipulates the relationship between employee and applicants, and employers and contractors and all those work forces, okay? So if you're an employer, you cannot discriminate against someone based on any sort of arrangement or terms of offering of employment to the person. You cannot say, oh, because this person is from certain ethnicity, you cannot have this job, it doesn't fit this role. You can also say, because this person has got a disability, it can't fit this role. You know, so all of those were put in place so that everybody can be able to be in a workforce and then contribute. So even if somebody is wheelchair bound, doesn't mean the person cannot be an IT expert or cannot be the best at, you know, whatever work the person is interested in. So you must give people that provision to be able to prosper in any workforce they choose to be, as far as they can, and are able to prove that they can do this certain role. You must give them the opportunity, so you must not discriminate against them. Okay, so also you can't discriminate against people from having promotion or opportunities or sending them to training. So you can't say, oh, because this person is a female, she cannot go for this training because we don't, you know, moving on as an organization, it would not be the best course of action for us. So you cannot do all of those kind of discrimination or victimize a person for whatever reason, okay? So it is important that all of these are taken into consideration when an employee is dealing with their member of staff or getting a new or seeking to employ someone for a certain position. And also, in terms of pay, you cannot also say because this female staff, this person is a female staff, she would have time to, you know, you won't then pay them equally as the male counterpart, even though they are on the same role. So all of those issues are not acceptable. And that is why the discrimination comes under the Equality Act as well, okay? And moving on to section 40, also, it talks about harassment. You cannot harass people at the workplace, whether it be the employer to employee or even employee between employees. Harassment is not acceptable. If you're a contract staff, there are certain laws that are in place as well, which comes under section 41 to look after your interest in terms of how you're being treated with promotion, with opportunities, also with terms of contract and all that, okay? And so on, okay? So all that deals with the terms that relates to discrimination and harassment, okay? Now, we all understand that COVID-19 has changed a lot of things. A lot of things have changed. And one of the very key things that is the reason why we're looking at this is that many of us are in one sort of employment, like I said earlier on, or employees ourselves, okay? And we understand that it's not business as usual. In as much as we are trying to still carry out our duties in our certain roles that we are employed for, the way we now operate is different. A lot of people are now working from home, which means that the traditional understanding of equality and diversity have changed in many respects, okay? So we now have to understand how these things operate post-COVID. Hence, we are actually having this training today. So clearly, there are unequal impact of COVID-19 for everyone, okay? Not everyone is suffering the same way. And what do I mean by this, okay? So if, for instance, before COVID, somebody had maybe, I don't know, is diabetic or had asthma or had some certain illness, you could still go into work and do your normal duties or carry out your normal work in the workspace, in the office space. Now, when COVID came, certain group of the people in the society that had health challenges were told, you have to chill from the outside and the entire population. So what happened? They have to start practicing working from home, okay? So clearly, that means that the impact for them is different from those who were still able to commute into work because they are probably what we now call first line staff or important member of workforce, for instance, the NHS and other work forces like that. Okay, so as the corona pandemic unfolded, it became clearer that its impact is not being felt in equal ways across the society. And this is both in terms of who is at risk of the disease, but also who is more likely to feel a lasting financial and social impact as a result. You see, although the UK government initially suggested that the pandemic is a great social leveler, you know, and many politicians like Rishi Sunak was saying, oh, we're all in this together and all that. But, you know, over time, it has been clear that it's not what they're saying, you know. And if we look at a few examples, like Public Health England published a report on the disparity in the risk and outcome of COVID-19. This publication confirmed the impact of COVID-19 as replicated existing health inequalities, and in some cases has increased them. Risk factors include age. People over 80, they are more at risk of catching the disease, and they, you know, say most likely might not be able to pull through. And, you know, there's also, from this report, it says that, you know, in terms of male and female, that the male are at higher risk of catching the disease than the female. And then, you know, people also who are living in a more deprived area are most likely to catch this. And there are a lot of theories around that, you know, people who are living in a more deprived area might have they've said that you might have more people, living very closely, and for a variety of reasons, maybe house shared or reasons like that. Because of that, if one person has got the disease, there's every likelihood it might spread really quickly around that group of people, okay? And certain people with health condition, like I mentioned earlier, and the Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and BIM groups. So this set of people, category of people in the society have, according to Public Health England, are more likely to be affected by the disease, which means it would impact in their job and also their income financially. Okay, so like I was saying earlier, the frontline staffs are people you could refer to as the police or the nurses and supermarkets, staff workers, and people like that who are not able to work remotely, then physically need to go into their workplace to be able to carry out their roles. Okay, so the frontline staffs who are continuing to work during the lockdown, the nurses, supermarket staff, care, home workers, etc., were disproportionately lower lower paid members of the workforce, often also from the BEM group. Similarly, those who are unable to work from home and now have to be told by the government to return to work tend to be given lower paid manual jobs. Inevitably, they have faced greater unable and exposure to coronavirus than those people who have been able to remain at home during this period. Okay, so because of this research by Public Health England finding that certain group of people who haven't been able to work from home or are in lower paid jobs, they have to go into their workplace. They've been the most people who have been at the disadvantaged end, perhaps been exposed to the COVID virus. Now, I was saying earlier that, for instance, those who are front of house, or let me just go really down to another example and say cleaners. For instance, people who are working as cleaning operative for TFL, what have been provided for them to be able to carry on their roles? Clearly, it's not them using the usual glove and just walking about with their pair of uniforms they used to wear. They probably at this point, TFL would decide, okay, you have to be a bit more protected. So you would wear certain gears now to be able to carry out your role. Okay, now if that hasn't happened for whatever reason, this has to be called out, because that would not be fair for them to be able to carry out their roles. Because if they fall sick of coronavirus and not be able to then carry on working, what happens to their financial situation in terms of looking after themselves and perhaps their family? Okay, so now another report by the Institute of Facial and Study and UCL looked at the impact of coronavirus also on another group of people, now on parents. Okay, particularly in the light of school closure, they found out that parents suffered in another way in terms of the effect from coronavirus. They found out that mothers were more likely than fathers to have lost their jobs or been furloughed, seeing a greater reduction in work hours, suffer interruptions in their work, and pick up the bulk of time spent with childcare and housework. The researcher warned that this could lead to further increase in gender wage gap. Now, this is another effect coming on from the whole pandemic, coronavirus pandemic, okay? And the reason why this is being picked up is also that employers would take note of this, that now from this pandemic, what tends to have happened is parents, particularly mother, they're saying, would pick up more childcare role and housework, because a lot of people are working from home, and mothers who are working from home will juggle doing their work as well as looking after the kids, and perhaps when the kids, before they went back to school recently, when the kids were being taught online, they would also try and, make sure that they help the kids out with their schoolwork and juggle doing their regular work, which would mean that certain aspect would lack. It'd probably be them putting less time or less time into the kids' work, or struggling to put more into their work to do for the employer. And in the end, they might end up saying, okay, now that I'm in this position, I might, just cut down on workload so that I can pay more attention to this. And perhaps some parents might have disabled kids where they used to take these kids to certain facility or school that manage them whilst they are at work. Well, when everything closed down, clearly they couldn't take these kids to those facilities, which means they have to make the hard choice of probably taking more time off work to be able to manage those situations. Now, at this point, the employer is supposed to say, okay, now that you have this challenge, this is what we're going to do. They have to put things in place that would be fair enough for those parents, whether a mother or a father, to be able to carry on providing the service to the employer, okay? And hopefully not be affected financially, whereby they have to cut down on their work and getting less pay because employers need to then get someone else to do part of their job, and so on and so forth. So all that are issues that are coming post-COVID that one needs to start thinking about in terms of equality and diversity. And another study by London Metropolitan University also emphasized that working parents are more likely to suffer long-term career progression implications, since they have less time to focus on career enhancing activities compared to those without children. Again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier on. And, if they are faced with childcare, the option of childcare and work, most times parents' attention and empathy would, or whatever term you would like to use there, would go more on saying, okay, I would rather do XYZ. And then again, it depends. For instance, if you have a household where there are 3, 4, 5 kids, parents, and it depends on their age as well. If they are young kids, say, they're from toddler to maybe teen, the situation is very dicey. You'd be like, okay, now I don't have a choice but to cut down on my workload so I can look after these kids. So any parent who are in that position would clearly not be thinking of, oh, I have to do this training, I have to do this course, I have to do this, I have to do that to be able to meet this target, to be able to make sure that my promotion is secured, or I'm able to then get into this other sector or what have you. They won't be thinking of that, because clearly they have all of this challenge to deal with, and the priority will most likely be on the kids. And, talking from personal experience being a parent, you will definitely be thinking, oh no, I haven't even been spending much time with the kids, and this whole pandemic that has kept us at home has made me understand that my kid needs XYZ. So I'm going to make sure that moving on, this is what I need to put in place. So now at this point, what would happen is the employer need to think, okay, now that you are in this position, this is what we're going to put in place for you to be able to make sure that you carry out your role. So that both parties can reach a middle ground, and then they can, reach a middle ground, and progress can be made in some ways, which is not going to be easy, or, moving on. Okay. The Trade Union Congress, UTC, also reported on another aspect of issues that have come up since the COVID. Okay. They're also looking at it from the female perspective. They say 1 in 4 pregnant women and a new mother have experienced unfair treatment or discrimination at work, including being singled out for redundancy or furlough. 71% of new mothers are also struggling to return to work because they are unable to find childcare to enable them to go back to work. Again, this is another challenge that where employers need to look into, and try and, again, create an environment where all of these things can be less of an impact, especially on the employee. And this is the reason why, in the first place, Equality Act came into place for fairness, okay? So employers need to make sure that they create room for people who are expecting or just had a baby to be able to still work and be inclusive in the system, in the organization, and not just decide to put them on redundancy because we feel like, okay, they're not going to be more effective in this position they are right now, or put them on furlough. Now, all of this, we want to see how it is relevant to the employers, okay? So this issue haven't gone on, the issue haven't gone unacknowledged by the government. According to Equality Hub, they have promised to look further into Public Health England report on disparity of risk. As mentioned above, however, realistically, national initiatives to inequality may be a long-term coming, and in any event, without action at local level, we're unlikely to have much of an impact. This means that employers have a significant part to play in trying to tackle inequality impact of coronavirus in workplace. Okay, we know it's not going to be easy because we understand it's not going to be easy because it has to be a case of looking at individual situation and then make adjustments and try and be fair. In that case, in an organization, and I can't even, just bring a particular example now because every firm, every organization, every company have a different operation, have a different outlook, provide different service. So it's going to be a case of, okay, we're in this sector, we're in transport sector. What do we do for the bus drivers? What do we do for the train drivers? What do we do for those who clean the buses and the train? Okay, we are in the coffee chain. What do we do for our members of staff? So it will be a case of making adjustments. Now, if you take, for instance, Starbucks, for example, Starbucks have those who are in their coffee shops on daily basis doing all the service for people coming in and out. Starbucks also have those who do their deliveries and all whatnot. So what is going to be put in place for this group of people and what is going to be put in place for that group of people? So all of this is a case of, okay, this is where we are. This member of this group of staff need XYZ and that group of staff need XYZ, and then put everything in place, okay? So especially at a time like this when businesses are facing significant financial and operational pressure, there is a risk that the longer this pandemic continues, employers may start losing sympathy with people who face barriers to returning to work. No matter how genuine those barriers might be, such as those who are shielding or having childcare issues. However, penalizing those individuals not only leave them vulnerable to discrimination in the workplace, but also risk perpetuating existing equality issue. And the impact could be unfortunately felt for a long time to come. So businesses are already facing a massive challenge because if they're going to be fair to look after everyone, if they're going to be practicing equality in its ramification. It means they will look at individual situation and say, okay, you're working from home. You need a certain kind of desk to be able to make you continue your job because of this condition you have. That would cost them money to get that piece of equipment to deliver it to you, to be able to carry on working. They cannot turn around and say, oh, because you have this disability or you have this problem, this challenge, we have already made space for you in the workplace where you have this certain kind of chair that is more ergonomic or desk. Neither you have to work for home. You're going to make do with what you have at home. No, they have to decide, okay, this is how your workspace is at home. We're going to provide XYZ so that you can carry on your role. Now, if they have to do that to 3, 4, 5 staff, that is definitely stretching them. Okay, so this is not an easy time for businesses, organizations, because they have to make significant changes that would cost them financially. Okay, so employers need to take steps to ensure that they reduce the risk of discrimination at work or in the workplace. Now, the reason why we have to say work or at work or the workplace, for those who can't go back into the physical office space, there are still a lot of people working from home. They need to make sure that whether they are at work in the work environment or they are working from home, they need to reduce every form of discrimination. Everybody is still entitled to every right that they have stipulated in the company before COVID came on. By making sure they have an equal opportunity policy in place, they need to then review their policy and adhere to the policy and make sure that everyone is catered for in all groups, irrespective of their age, their sex, their disability, and carry on regular training for staffs, okay? So you cannot say, oh, this man is 70 years old, this woman is 70 years old, she's been with this company for more than 20 years, and now that this pandemic have come, we can't bring them back into the workspace and so on and so forth. You need to make sure that you provide the enabling environment for them to carry on their role. Now, so we understand that clearly Corona has created new challenges and a lot of disproportionateness has been created as a result of COVID-19 in many workforce. So now extra steps need to be taken to tackle these challenges effectively. So the question is, how do we do this? It very much depends on the nature and makeup of the individual organization. It's not one fit for all. The way an IT firm would provide for the needs of their staff post-COVID is different from the way Amazon perhaps will provide for the needs of their staff because their operation is different. But in all, the principle remains that fairness needs to be given to everyone. That is just the general rule. At this point, if we have any question, I would be happy to take any question. Otherwise, if anyone wants to share any experience of, being in the position of equality or discriminated against or being in any of these that we've spoken of so far, please feel free to do that, okay? Right, so if there's no question at this point, I will just...
Not okay, I want it. Yes.
Do we have a question there?
Yes, well, first, I'd like to say thank you again.
Okay.
So far, I've got to learn one or two things as well. So, whilst you were talking, I think I've experienced one behavior or the other that were not very comfortable with me at work.
Okay.
And sometimes, probably because I don't have the experience, we overlook these things. We say, oh, Christian, or this, that, with that. But right now, based on what you just taught now, I'm definitely going to put this into consideration when such things, when I have such behavior. And the question I want to ask is that if such things happen to me at workplace in a way when someone, either behave rudely or because of my color or whatever, who the best person to report to? Who should I speak to?
No, I think with that question, it depends on who is doing that to you.
Yeah.
If it's a colleague, your line manager will be the first person to speak with.
Okay.
And if it's your line manager, perhaps you have to go above your line manager to report to the next person above your line manager. Okay. So generally, you would speak to your line manager. And most importantly, let's go back to the traditional idea of equality and diversity. If you feel like somebody is doing or saying something against you at work, don't overlook it, because if you do, it would carry on, or it will pass on to somebody else, or somebody else will carry on doing that to you in the same environment. Now, this is the reason why it needs to be looked into. If, for instance, a colleague say or have an attitude or do something towards to you that is not acceptable, that discriminate against you, whether because of your color or because of your sex or because of any of these that have been listed in Equality Act, first and foremost, you must record this down. Whether you are putting it down on paper saying, on the 25th of September 2021, Mr. Alex said XYZ. Mr. Alex did this. And this happened. You need to sort of keep this in a documented form, because if you want to prove that this has happened, how do you prove that? You might, again, not remember in the future if you don't document it, what has transpired before. Okay. Now, if you document it and you go to your line manager and say, oh, this is the experience I had from Mr. Alex. Okay. He said XYZ, or he did this. And again, it's important to record if there was somebody who witnessed this thing that was done to you. Okay. Now, if you go to your line manager and say this was done, it's expected that your line manager will take that up. If your line manager do take that up, it might be the case that Alex did that out of ignorance, and that can be resolved between you and your line manager, Alex. It comes to you and apologizes. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean it the way you understand it or the way you took it. Yeah. Or it might be the case that it's a gross case of discrimination, and your manager would then take it to HR, and then HR would deal with that. But what is important at this point is, if something is happening to you that you feel uncomfortable with, call it out. Right. So we've talked about, how it's relevant to the employers. Now we are going to carry on looking at what should be done the way forward. Okay. Because like I said, one way or the other, we are all affected with this topic, whether we're employers or employee, and we need to know what needs to be done. And it's more important if we're at the receiving end where we're employees. And like our brother, Mr. Jeff was saying earlier on, he's experienced it. I think it's better when we even share experiences, and when we do trainings like this, people voice out their experiences, help others to learn and know the way forward with issues like this, especially when we come when we are in the position of the receiving hand. Okay, so looking at the way forward, gathering of information, it's very important. What employers or organizations, companies, charities, whatever environment where a work transaction is being done, you need to gather information about everything that has to do with your day-to-day running of your business, as well as the people who would then carry out these roles to make sure that the business is running. So you need to gather information. What is the makeup of your workforce? If you are, again, an employer who employs mostly people from the BIM group, what are the things that you now need to put in place to protect these people? Okay, and earlier on, we saw where a study shows that this group of people would suffer most. And the example of it being that they might live in an environment where they are sharing apartments and stuff like that. And if one person then comes home with a coronavirus, and another person in the apartment or other people in the apartment can be affected by the coronavirus thing, and then which means they probably can't go into work and all that sort of business. So, you look at your workforce, the makeup of your workforce, and then adjust accordingly. What equality factors might be particularly relevant to your organization, charity, or company? Who might be at greater risk of suffering disproportionately as a result of coronavirus? It is important to find out all of this information to understand the needs and the priorities. Okay, so piece all of this together, then you can understand what to put in place. It's very important to carry out risk assessment. Very, very vital. Ordinarily, companies, employers would carry out risk assessment. For instance, if you have a child, if you've just a new mother and you're returning to work, or you are in a workforce and you fall pregnant, your employer needs to carry out a risk assessment to make sure that you are comfortable, even in that condition of being pregnant, to still be able to carry out your work. Or if you just return back to work from having a baby, they also have to carry out a risk assessment to make sure that your return to work is not posing any risk to yourself or the company. It's already a requirement for employers to carry out health and safety risk assessment before they return employees to workplace. This should include consideration of people who are at greater risk of coronavirus, those in vulnerable groups identified by the government, and also those who are statistically have been shown to have greater risk, such as people from the BIM group. So carry out impact assessment. Now, apart from carrying out risk assessment, you also have to carry out impact assessment. Whether you're a charity, you are whatever company, organization, or firm that you have, you may consider introducing equality impact assessment, okay, to determine how your policies or decisions in response to COVID-19 affect people who are protected under the Equality Act 2010. This can be an effective way of understanding and responding to equality risk. Tailor your action. People who are experiencing coronavirus people who are experiencing coronavirus, and this is coming in variety of ways. Every individual would have a different experience from the other. And therefore, employers need to consider that it's not a one size fits all, and might need to use an individual approach for every employee. Okay, so what is the issues or challenges that a new parent or a parent will face? It's not the same challenge that someone who is who has a disability, mobility disability, or speech disability, or sight disability, or whatever disability will face. So you will just look at individual employer and what the challenges are, and then put things in place for their return to work. And this may mean tailoring your response and making reasonable adjustments, even when not required by law. So for good people management that is also required by the company or will enhance the company's production and workflow, it is good to look beyond what the government have stipulated to make sure that things are in place to reduce the impact of coronavirus on those who are feeling it the most. So you need to look beyond even the law and then put things in place. Address pay quality. Ensure that pay cuts do not focus on people lower down in the organization or charity or your firm, who are often maybe the women, and watch out for women reducing their hours, and therefore, reducing their hours would therefore mean reducing their pay and looking out after their children. So when you are looking at reducing workforce, do not pick on the women and say, okay, because this is a woman with a family and has kids to look after and what have you. So I think at this point would have to reduce our workforce or make her redundant or put her furlough, because that would then impact on their take-home pay and would mean that when they're in that position, it would affect them negatively. Be aware of the impact of imbalance of power. In an economic downturn, power shifts towards employers. Employees can feel powerless and vulnerable and may not speak out to protect themselves and others. This can lead to an unhealthy culture, uniform decision-making, and in worst-case scenario, an increase in imbalance and sexual harassment, and so on and so forth. Employers should take positive steps to maintain healthy and open workforce culture. Okay, so what again do the employers need to do? They need to monitor situation and then adjust. This is not a static situation and may well change as the pandemic evolves, and the longer it goes on, in particular, watch out for the disproportionate impact of redundancy and unemployment of particular groups, such as women, BAME, and those with disability. Continue to carry out equality impact assessment on future decision to identify whether particular groups may be affected disproportionately. Okay, so you need to keep on at every point in time monitoring the situation and making sure that fairness is in play. On a positive note, to end this, to come to almost bringing this to an end, to wrapping this whole training up, there are some political, I'm very sorry. There are some potential glimmers of light regarding equality among what COVID otherwise feel like entirely negative news. A report by LSE and the Center for Economic Performance noted all of this, including large-scale move to home working. Now, it could be a positive thing to work from home, because working from home means you don't have to travel and you don't have to deal with certain things that usually would upset you when you're traveling into your workplace and stuff like that. A lot of companies, charities, organizations means that flexible working would continue in the long term, and also reducing those travel stress might just bring some more additional, I'm looking for a word now, more additional positive input into your day-to-day work. Increased home working could benefit women in particular, okay? Which means they would have more time to do other things that they would normally struggle with, with, again, the time they would use to get into work and come back, that has been taken out, so they cannot put those time into doing a more important thing for the family. Increased flexibility of this sort may also benefit people with certain disability who may, for example, find it harder to leave the house or travel very far, giving them greater access to job. Okay. There appear to have been a shift in the allocation of childcare and housekeeping responsibility during coronavirus. Okay. Where a lot of men have been forced to work from home, they could help with easing the traditional gender role in the future. So fathers who now work from home can now help out with childcare and do a bit more and spend more time with their kids. So these are sort of positive notes to equality and diversity from the perspective of work. So while there are some potential positive development, action will still be required by employers in order to see this translate into changes in the workplace. Coronavirus and the sources of home working gives employers an opportunity to revisit perceptions around flexible working and share parental leave. And in doing so, take steps to promote equality in the workplace. So now we're going to come to the conclusion. Although coronavirus does not discriminate in the sense that no one is immune, whether you're young, old, female or male, or whoever you are, no discrimination, it can affect anyone. It is clear that its impact is being felt very differently by different group of people. The worry is that if left unchecked, the negative impact of this on diversity and inclusion will be felt in a long time after the pandemic. And after the pandemic has ended, and could undermine some of the real social progress which have been made by things like the Me Too and gender pay gap reports that we've had in the past. Before the pandemic started, there were a lot of campaign about pay gap between men and women across the globe. And companies were beginning to really make changes because, they have to put out their report at the end of the year. And if these disparities continue, uprise will happen and a lot of negative things will come off it. So a lot of companies were starting to put things in place. Now with this pandemic, again, women could be made redundant because, again, they're in the position where maybe they fall pregnant or they just have a new kid and the company really need to fill a certain role or move on on a project or a certain thing and think, this person at this point is struggling and we cannot put this project on hold. We cannot, so for that reason, we would have to do XYZ and then say, put the person on follow-on, which means they will have lesser pay and then move on to get someone else to cover that role or something. So even though there are some positive from these, there are also the issue that would this pay gap thing still continue to happen? Maybe because people cannot go into training for the fact that they don't have the time, they're juggling too many things with the outfall from the COVID-19. Okay, so that's something that one have to look at. Although employers are undoubtedly being pulled in all directions by coronavirus, it's important they do not lose sight of equality in their action and decision if they are to play a part in reviving and taking away disadvantage of coronavirus. They need to pay attention. They need to make adjustment. They need to do certain things to make sure that all of these pandemic issues in the workplace does not affect equality and diversity, because every workforce have all of these categories that are mentioned under the Equality Act. They have people of different sex, they have people of different race, they have people of different disability category, and they have people of different sexual gender and all that. So with COVID, work organization, firms, companies, charities need to understand that the practice of equality and diversity needs to be stepped up so that people would not be on any level of disadvantage. So all of these we've talked about this afternoon. It's making us understand, it's just for us to understand that as an employer or as an employee, you need to take note of the issue of equality and diversity. And the equality and diversity is all about ensuring everybody has equal opportunity, not treated differently or discriminated against because of their characteristics, which again goes back to whether they be married or single or bisexual or young or old, it doesn't matter. Diversity is about taking into account the differences between people and group or group of people and placing a positive value on those differences, okay? So the bottom line is, if you're an employee and you feel that you've been discriminated against or you're not being treated fairly in any form, you've got to speak out so that these issues can be looked into and then can be resolved. Because if these things are not looked into and resolved, it tends to then create, challenges that drag on, and then at some point might that, gets to affect you in a very, very negative way. So that would be all for now. And, I'm open to any question anyone would like to ask or have any contribution or want to share any experience. Yeah, please.
I would want to share just on the speak out. I would want to share something. I think if the moderator would permit, and if you
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So basically, this is a personal experience, you see. So I was in an employment that had a leadership in the term of a team leadership, I would say. So when I got onto that team, fortunately for me, I was the only Black person there. This isn't a race game, but I just feel, it's one worth talking about in this sort of forum. Mm-hmm. So when I joined, the team manager will always address me by the name. He knows my name, my formal or official name. He knows it, but he will always call me dude. And initially I felt, anyway, it was just a way of, calling a male adult, just a sort of nickname, if you like. And it continued. And when I noticed carefully, he would address other folks in the same team by their real name. When it comes to me, he was dude. And over time, it became something everyone in the team started calling me dude. And I recall that my name is Martin. Is my name changed to dude here? So I noticed, when I pay careful attention, I noticed, okay, this is outright discrimination now. Because you cannot call other people by their name and address me as dude, and this is becoming a norm, in terms of what other team member calls me. So I called it out, you see. I said, well, my name is Martin. Please, from today henceforth, address me by my real name. And it stopped. Have I not called it out, this would have continued. And it's derogatory, if you like. So it goes back to the subject, the presenter has ended the note with speak out. Speak out. We must speak out whenever we are confronted with such situations. Okay? So that's just a remark from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. I appreciate that. There's a question here. Someone is asking, said, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Karen. How do you identify system racism, and what steps do people have to follow?
Oh, thank you very much, Cindy, for that question. It's a very good one. Okay. Now, this is a little tricky. Systematic racism, system racism depends. Depends on what organization you are. And I would say this because I had a friend who was in that position. She used to work with the Metropolitan Police Authority. Now, the police authority, not the Metropolitan Police itself, the authority. What was the Metropolitan Police Authority about? It was about the arm of Metropolitan Police that looked after the admin, if you like, the administrative arm of the police itself. They were not uniformed men and women, they were civilians, if you like, but they were called the Metropolitan Police Authority. Now, you would expect an organization like this to be very mindful about racism. But this friend of mine and other men in that organization were really treated badly. And even though it was called that, it was really, excuse my French, it was messy, you know. So it depends on what organization you are and how you manage to identify this. Like what Mr. Martin just said, he was in an organization and somebody was calling him a certain name, why addressing him with a certain name, why addressing others in that same team by their first name or perhaps their last name. So that's what he did straight away was to call it out to them and say, maybe his colleagues and his line manager say, listen, this is not my name and I don't appreciate you addressing me as such. Now, like I was saying to Mr. Jeff, who asked a question earlier on, when you are in this position, you've got to say, okay, this is what is being done. This is not right. You're documenting what is not right. If possible, thank God for video these days or a phone recorder, record it. You need to have an evidence of what is being done. Whether you're writing it down and having a witness saying, okay, this happened this time, or Mr. or Miss whatever, Miss Joy, you were here when this happened. You heard this person say this. It's your, this happened in your presence. So can you please sign this paper for me to say you were present when this happened? Most importantly, what I'm saying to you now is when something is happening you don't like, whether it's been by action or by speech or by, by one person or a group of people, you need to be able to document that particular issue, however it's happening, and then go on to your line manager. If it's not your line manager who is doing whatever to you, and if it's your line manager who is doing this thing to you, you might go a step higher than your line manager to report what is going on. Importantly, speak out. Okay. So when you do the first report, it needs to be looked into. If this is not being looked into by who you've reported to, you might want to go straight to HR to say, this is what I'm experiencing. I have made this report before, and this is the action I was taking, and I need this to be looked into. Your HRO should be able to look into it and resolve it. Now, where that is not happening, then you can then start thinking this is systematic, that you're going from one level of leadership to another and nothing is being done. You might want to then move on to seek help outside, whether from a charity or from a body, whether legal body or whatever that can help you resolve this. It needs to be resolved. And there is a whole process to that. I don't know if we have enough time to delve a bit into it, okay? So you make all this documentation down to outline what is being done and when it's been done, and who was a witness to it and all that, and you're going up the leadership to report and find a solution to it. Whilst all this is happening, you are not supposed to do certain things. And most importantly, you can also come back to your family or your friends to say, okay, this is what I'm experiencing at work. Talk to somebody, and they can sort of say, okay, this is what you need to do. Have a kind of a rapport or a chat or something with somebody so that this thing does not impact on your productivity at work, essentially, because you don't want that to happen. Now, it depends on what, again, this is. I mean, for the speaker, Mr. Martin, who just shared an experience with us, it was just a name calling. It could be that this person or somebody is picking at you with your job, saying, oh, you're not even effective in your job, don't even know why you're in this position. That is another level. That needs to be treated in a different way. So it depends on what is happening